There are places in the world where darkness doesn't simply settle after sundown. It lingers, rooted deep in the soil, in the floorboards, in the air that carries the breath of the past. These places are not shaped by legends alone, nor by whispers traded between the curious and the terrified. They are formed by events, real, documented, undeniable, that carve themselves into the land with a permanence no passage of time can soften. When night falls over them, it is not just a change in light. It is an awakening of memory. And for those who dare to look closely, the echoes of what happened there still move, subtly, patiently, just beneath the surface. Long before tourists visited them with cameras and thrill-seekers whispered their names in the dark, these houses, these rooms, these isolated patches of earth existed quietly. But the tragedies that unfolded inside them were anything but quiet. The earliest of these places, in chronological order, emerged in the early 20th century, when a single home in Iowa became the site of something so brutal, so inexplicable, that the town never recovered from the wound it left behind. The Villisca Axe Murder House stands today exactly as it did more than a century ago. Small, unassuming, deceptively peaceful. But on a warm night in June of 1912, it became the epicenter of one of America's most infamous unsolved crimes and the days leading up to the murders. Villisca was like any other Midwestern town. Quiet streets, the faint hum of church picnics, children running across yards as the long summer days stretched lazily toward dusk. The Moore family was well-liked, respected, known for their involvement in local church groups and community activities. Josiah and Sarah Moore lived with their 4 children, Herman, Catherine, Boyd, and Paul, in a modest white frame house that still stands today. On June 9th, the family attended a Children's Day service at the local Presbyterian church. No one who saw them that evening could have guessed that it would be the last time the Moores were seen alive. When they returned home later that night, they brought with them 2 young girls, Lena and Ina Stillinger, who had been invited for a sleepover. The house, nestled near the edge of town, grew silent as the children fell asleep. But sometime after midnight, someone entered the home. There was no sign of forced entry, no broken doors or shattered windows. Whoever stepped inside did so quietly, with intention. The killer, or killers, because no one truly knows, moved from room to room, beginning with Josiah and Sarah. An axe, found later at the scene, had been used with such force that investigators struggled to understand how a human being could deliver the blows it left behind. Upstairs, downstairs, across the small rooms of the house, the attacker drifted like a shadow, ending the lives of all 8 occupants before dawn. The Stillinger girls were the last to die. When the bodies were discovered the next morning, the town of Villisca descended into chaos. Doors were locked, suspicions flared into accusations, and soon the case became a national obsession. But despite the extensive investigation, despite multiple suspects, trials, and theories, no one was ever convicted. Today, the house remains frozen in time. The furniture is sparse, the floors creak softly underfoot, and the atmosphere inside is uncomfortably still, as if holding its breath. Visitors report cold spots that drift across rooms with no source, sounds of footsteps pacing in the attic, and faint whispers, almost mechanical in tone, that rise from the darkness just before dawn, the time believed to be closest to when the murders occurred. Some claim that the house itself feels aware, its walls pulsing with a heaviness that does not belong to an ordinary structure. As the earliest location chronologically, it is the foundation stone for a century of dark history that would continue to unfold across the globe. Just a few years later, on the other side of the world in New South Wales, Australia, another place was quietly collecting its own shadows. Monte Cristo Homestead, perched on a hill above the small town of Junee, did not suffer a single defining tragedy like Villisca. Instead, it gathered darkness slowly, piece by piece, through a cascade of misfortunes, accidents, abuses, and deaths that accumulated over decades. Built in 1884, the homestead began as the proud residence of Christopher and Elizabeth Crawley, wealthy landowners whose presence dominated the region. But behind the grandeur of the home's architecture, its sweeping staircase, ornate ironwork, and wide verandas, something colder was stirring. The Crawleys themselves were not known for cruelty, but the homestead became the stage for a series of events that would permanently stain its legacy. A stable boy, said to be only 8 years old, died under mysterious circumstances, allegedly burned to death after falling asleep near a lantern. A maid fell from the balcony, though rumors suggested she may have been pushed. A mentally disabled man, kept chained in an outbuilding for years, was later found beside the body of his caretaker, whose throat had been slit. The man claimed the act had been committed by something he called the devil. Local townspeople whispered about the Crawley children. Several died young, though in those days such losses were not uncommon. Elizabeth Crawley herself became increasingly reclusive after her husband's death, retreating to an upstairs room where she reportedly spent more than 2 decades in near-total isolation. By the time the Crawley line ended, the homestead was already known as the most haunted house in Australia. Those who entered after its abandonment reported an oppressive weight inside, as if the house had grown weary of keeping its secrets silent. Footsteps echoed across empty hallways, doors slammed in rooms with no drafts, and visitors described feeling watched from the upper landing by a presence that never stepped into the light. The portrait of Elizabeth Crawley, hanging near the staircase, seemed to follow people with her eyes, her expression tightening when anyone moved too close. Even today, the homestead carries itself with a solemn, almost predatory stillness, as if it is waiting. For what? No one can say. As the decades marched onward and the 20th century entered its middle stretch, the world was changing, modernizing, expanding into realms of industry and entertainment. But even amid progress, pockets of eeriness continued to take shape. In the 1930s, deep in the canals of Xochimilco near Mexico City, a small island grew into one of the most unsettling places on Earth, not because of bloodshed or violence, but because one man's grief and fear took physical form in a way the world had never seen. The Island of the Dolls began as a simple patch of land owned by a man named Don Julian Santana. According to the story he told for decades, a young girl had drowned near his island, her body found floating among the lilies that clustered around the water's edge. Whether the story was literal truth or a symbolic reflection of his loneliness remains debated, but what emerged from it is not disputed. Shortly after the supposed drowning, Don Julian claimed he heard whispers at night, soft voices drifting across the water, accompanied by the sensation of eyes watching him from the trees. One day, he found a doll floating in the canal, its plastic limbs worn by the current. Believing it belonged to the drowned girl's spirit, he hung it on a tree as a gesture of respect and protection. But the act did not quiet the whispers. In fact, they seemed to grow stronger, and so began a ritual that would continue for more than 50 years. Every time he found a doll broken, discarded, decaying, he hung it somewhere on the island, arms dangling, eyes missing, hair tangled, faces cracked. Over time, the island transformed into a silent chorus of plastic expressions, each doll staring outward with an eerie blend of innocence and decay. Visitors who came to the island during Don Julian's lifetime described him as gentle but haunted. He insisted that the dolls spoke to him, cried at night, and turned their heads when no one was looking. After his death in 2001, found in the same canal where he said the girl had drowned, the island changed from an oddity to a shrine of unease. Today, the dolls remain exactly as he left them, their bodies weathered by rain and sun, their hollow eye sockets gazing through the humid air. Some sway gently on their strings when the wind moves across the water, creating the illusion of life in their cracked porcelain faces. Those who visit report the sensation of being followed, their footsteps mirrored by something unseen just behind them. Even skeptics leave the island subdued, the weight of its atmosphere clinging to them long after they depart. But while the island of the dolls grew from one man's fear, the next location in the timeline emerged from a different force: obsession. In the early years of the 20th century, a wealthy widow named Sarah Winchester began building what would become one of the most labyrinthine houses in history. The Winchester Mystery House, located in San Jose, California, is not known for a single violent event, nor for a haunting tied to one moment in time. Its darkness is structural, embedded in its very design. Sarah Winchester was the widow of William Wirt Winchester, heir to the fortune of the Winchester Repeating Arms Company. After the death of her husband and child, she inherited vast wealth. But grief consumed her. According to legend, she sought out a medium who told her that her family was cursed by the spirits of those killed by Winchester rifles. The only way to escape them, the medium allegedly warned, was to build, and never stop building. Whether Sarah believed this literally or used construction as a way to cope with loss, the result was extraordinary. For 38 years, she oversaw non-stop work on her mansion. Day and night, hammering, sawing, plastering, rebuilding. Staircases that lead to ceilings, doors that open into walls, hallways that turn abruptly into dead ends, rooms hidden within rooms, windows built into the floor, traps, misdirections, and deceptive passageways woven deliberately into the structure. The house became a physical manifestation of a restless mind, twisting and expanding in unpredictable patterns. Visitors today describe the interior as disorienting, as if the house rearranges itself subtly when no one is looking. Cold spots bloom suddenly, then vanish. Floorboards creak in empty rooms. Whispers slip through vents that appear to connect to nowhere. The house feels alive, not malicious, but alert, watchful, aware. It is a maze constructed by grief, designed to confuse not just spirits, but anyone who dares to enter. And as the 20th century progressed, the line between fiction and reality began to blur when another building drifted into infamy. Not because of what happened inside, but because of what it inspired. The Overlook Hotel, born from Stephen King's imagination, is not a literal location, but its roots are deeply anchored in the real world. King's inspiration came from an actual place, the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, Colorado, which would itself become an icon of paranormal lore. Yet the Overlook, though fictional, deserves its place in this history because it reshaped how the world perceives haunted places. King stayed at the Stanley Hotel in 1974, at a time when the hotel was preparing to shut down for winter. Empty hallways, echoing dining rooms, silent corridors. King wandered through the quiet spaces, and something about them began to settle into his mind like frost creeping across a window pane. What emerged became The Shining, a story not just about ghosts, but about the psychological erosion that isolation can inflict upon the human mind. The Overlook Hotel, in King's vision, is a microcosm of madness, a place where time bends, memories bleed into the present, and the building itself becomes a malevolent force. Though fictional, the Overlook has influenced how countless people interpret real haunted hotels, casting a long shadow across paranormal culture. But while the Overlook exists in the realm of imagination, the Stanley Hotel stands firmly in reality, and its history is just as layered, just as unsettling, and just as deeply intertwined with the idea that some places hold onto things long after they are gone. And that is where this story will continue. The Stanley Hotel began its life with optimism, elegance, and a view of the Rocky Mountains that stretched endlessly across the horizon. Built in 1909 by Freeland Oscar Stanley, the hotel was intended as a luxurious sanctuary, a place where the wealthy could enjoy the clear mountain air. But its isolation, perched high above the town of Estes Park, gave it a peculiar stillness. Even in its early years, guests whispered about strange drafts that swept through sealed rooms, the faint sound of music drifting from the empty ballroom, and shadows that seemed to move just a heartbeat too quickly across polished floors. The hotel's architecture is pristine, almost regal, with long corridors that stretch into vanishing points, staircases bathed in pale mountain light, and grand spaces that echo even the softest footsteps. But beneath the beauty lies a tension, as if the building remembers something it cannot articulate. Over the decades, guests and staff have spoken of figures appearing at the ends of hallways, silhouettes dressed in turn-of-the-century clothing, drifting silently before evaporating into the air like mist. Children have claimed to hear playful laughter in the dead of night, long after the other rooms have gone quiet. Doors open by themselves. Lights flicker without explanation. The piano in the music room occasionally presses a single key, as though testing whether anyone is listening. Room 217, where Stephen King stayed in 1974, is perhaps the most infamous. Housekeepers long claimed the room carried a presence, gentle but firm. One maid reportedly survived an explosion there decades earlier and was said to have continued tending to the room long after her death. Guests who stay there describe their belongings being moved, tucked in, or arranged with careful precision, as though someone unseen insists on maintaining order. King himself admitted that the atmosphere of the nearly empty hotel during his stay, its quiet, its cavernous emptiness, was what gave birth to the Overlook's haunting nature. But the Stanley's darkness did not emerge from a single tragedy or a violent event. Instead, like many haunted places, its strangeness gathered slowly, accumulating with each passing year, with every guest who sensed something standing just over their shoulder in the quiet hours of the night. The hotel exists in a space between worlds, a place where memories cling tightly and time seems just slightly misaligned. From Iowa to Australia, from California to Colorado, and across the canals of Mexico, these locations share a common truth. Darkness is not always born in blood. Sometimes it grows from sorrow, sometimes from obsession, and sometimes from the subtle pressure of isolation, shaping the air until the walls themselves begin to breathe. But if these places hold fragments of the past, the darkness in them does not always remain confined. It drifts, like smoke, into the cultural imagination, blurring the boundary between what is real and what is merely perceived. As the 20th century progressed, a new form of fear began to take shape, not tied to singular tragedies or sprawling estates, but to the quiet spaces left behind after life has departed. The Stanley stood tall in the mountains, its presence enduring, but the world around it shifted. Visitors arrived seeking not comfort, but the thrill of the unknown. Researchers came with cameras and recorders, hoping to capture the whispers that countless guests insisted they had heard. Some claimed to see figures retreating into rooms that should have been empty. Others reported the unmistakable sensation of being watched from the balcony above the grand staircase. It became a place where the past did not sleep. And in its wake, the Overlook Hotel, fictional though it may be, cemented the idea that a building could absorb human emotion so deeply that it became a character itself, alive and hungry. The Stanley Hotel and the Overlook share this symbolic bond, one influencing the other, their legacies intertwined in the realm of haunted architecture. But as the 20th century neared its end, a different kind of darkness, far quieter, far more personal, began to emerge across the world in small, forgotten pockets of land. The Monte Cristo Homestead, the Island of the Dolls, the Winchester House, each carries its own kind of weight. But the true terror in these places does not come from flickering lights or disembodied footsteps. It comes from the reminder that isolation, grief, and fear are universal human experiences, and that buildings, like people, sometimes reflect the shadows pushed deep within their walls in the cool mountain air of Colorado. The Stanley Hotel developed a reputation not just as a beacon of luxury, but as a vessel for the unexplainable. The staff grew accustomed to late-night calls from guests insisting they had heard children running through the hallways, long after families had gone to bed. Others reported that they felt the mattress dip under the pressure of unseen weight, as if someone sat beside them in the darkness. The hotel's ballroom, the same room where King imagined the ghosts of the Overlook dancing eternally, remains a focal point of eerie activity. Musicians who rehearse there late at night describe the faint sound of applause echoing from the walls, as though a long-forgotten audience still lingers in the shadows, waiting for the performance to continue. What makes the Stanley particularly unsettling is not what is seen, but what is suggested. The air carries a subtle tension, like static before a storm. The quiet hum of the building seems a fraction too loud. The hallways feel slightly too long. Even the sunlight, when it filters through the high mountain windows, has a pale quality, as if diluted by the memories it illuminates. Those who visit the hotel expecting dramatic apparitions often leave surprised by something far more unsettling. A feeling of being observed by an intelligence without form. Something patient, something curious, something old. It is not aggressive, nor does it attempt to frighten. But it watches, and in its silence, there is an understanding that humans are merely temporary guests in a place that has existed longer than their fears. And yet, the Stanley is not the darkest location in this chronology. The shadows are subtle, atmospheric. But the places that came before it, the Villisca House, Monte Cristo, the Island of the Dolls, the Winchester Labyrinth, carry histories so heavy that they distort the very spaces they inhabit. Together they form a constellation of sites around the world where human suffering, tragedy, and dread have left permanent imprints on the land. Still, there is one unifying thread that binds all these places together. In each of them, the physical structure, the wood, the stone, the earth, has absorbed the emotional residue of what occurred there. Time, instead of washing it away, has sealed it in. And so, these places stand as monuments to the unseen, reminders that darkness is not always loud or violent. Sometimes it is quiet, steady, and patient, whispering through the cracks in the floorboards and lingering in the dust that settles on forgotten windowsills as night descends upon these locations. The line between memory and presence blurs. In the Villisca House, the air grows heavy as though the house itself remembers the night in 1912 when 8 lives were stolen. In Monte Cristo Homestead, the creaking of floorboards feels like footsteps from another era. In the Island of the Dolls, every shift of the wind animates the plastic limbs of 1,000 silent witnesses. And in the Winchester House, the architecture itself becomes a labyrinth of whispers, a maze designed not to keep spirits out, but to confuse those already trapped within. The Stanley Hotel, with its pristine corridors and mountain air, completes this lineage, not because it hosts the same violence, but because it reveals how thin the boundary between imagination and reality can become when isolation and silence settle in. Stephen King saw something in that boundary, something that moved, something that watched, something that waited. But beyond the fear these locations inspire, there is a deeper truth buried within them. Each of these places is a vessel of memory, of sorrow, of unresolved endings. They stand unchanged not because time forgot them, but because time remembers them too well. And the darkness they hold is not confined to the events themselves. It expands outward, slipping into the collective consciousness, shaping stories, shaping fears, shaping the very way people think about haunted spaces. There are those who believe that evil leaves a stain, an imprint on the physical world. Others insist that it is human grief, not evil, that creates echoes across the decades. And some say that these places, these houses, islands, and hotels, are not haunted by spirits at all, but by the narrative weight of their histories. Perhaps it is impossible to separate the story from the space. Perhaps every creaking board, every unexplained whisper, every flicker of shadow is simply the past struggling to be heard. But whatever the cause, these locations endure. The Villisca House, small and unassuming, continues to draw investigators who hope to unravel the unsolved nightmare that unfolded within its walls. The Monte Cristo Homestead stands proudly on its hill, its windows watching silently over the town below. The island of the dolls remains suspended in time, its decaying guardians swaying in the humid breeze. The Winchester Mystery House stretches endlessly, an architectural confession carved into wood and plaster. And the Stanley Hotel towers above the world, its grand corridors echoing with memories that refuse to fade as the night deepens across the world. One by one, these places slip into their truest form. Shadows lengthen, air grows still, walls seem to listen, and the darkness that binds them, spanning continents, crossing oceans, reaching back through a century of tragedy and obsession, settles like a silent fog over their foundations. For in the end, the terror of these iconic horror locations does not lie in ghosts or apparitions or things that move unseen in the night. It lies in the undeniable truth that places, like people, remember, and sometimes their memories are darker than anyone is willing to admit. And so the story continues through every hallway, every room, every worn floorboard and forgotten corner. The echoes persist, flickering at the edge of vision. The past breathes quietly, waiting for those who dare to return, to listen, to feel the weight of the years pressing gently against their skin. These places do not simply exist. They endure. And long after the last visitor has gone, the darkness they hold remains awake,